So next steps, what's on the horizon? What projects are you working on now that you'd like to tell us about?
Right, so we're working on continuing to work towards those 2018 and 2023 bond projects. Some of them still are not in the ground. Some of them went through a grant process. And because when you apply for state grants and you're awarded, for example, that 10 million that I said we got from the Flood Infrastructure Fund, the state has to do its due diligence. They require environmental reports. There's a lot of administrative things that go into it before they actually award you the money and allow you to get going on the project. So we had some delays on that. The other one of the other projects was delayed because we were asking TxDOT to consider participating in our event because it included the expressway and all the flooding that was happening along the frontage road. If you drive anywhere in Weslaco and Mercedes all the way to Harlingen, during any type of rain event, it floods, and it floods very quickly. And a lot of that has to do with that the watershed in that area and the design of the drainage is not sufficient to carry all that water that's coming in from the watershed. So we asked TxDOT to participate in the conveyance of water from the north to the south and into our system to get it out faster. So we were kind of waiting for TxDOT to give us some answer and response to our request. It wasn't successful, but we continue to advocate and ask for that and continue to highlight it as a major issue because it's TxDOT right away. We can't do anything. But we're continuing with our projects now and we're making those improvements. Hopefully at some point in time, those other improvements will be made and really it will work the way it's supposed to. So we'll continue to do that.
How many years ago was it that you asked for TxDOT's help?
At least 5. It was two sessions ago, for sure.
And you're still going to keep asking?
Absolutely. Yeah, they keep asking for different reports and maps, hydrological elevations, things that are going to help justify what the need really is. But we'll continue. We know it's important. I had a meeting this morning with some representatives out of TxDOT and said the same thing I said 5 years ago, which is this needs to be addressed. We have a lot of emergency vehicles. When you can't access or exit the expressway for 19 miles, or you can't get from the north to the south, and you only have one major hospital in that 20-mile stretch, so there's a lot of concern that people are really at risk when they shouldn't need to be.
And we've all experienced it, haven't we, on that expressway?
I would think most of us have seen that.
Yeah. And so other projects, other big things you're working on that you'd like to tell the viewers about?
So at any point in time, you guys can go on to hcdd1.org, the Hidalgo County Drainage District 1.org. And you can get a status on all of our projects, from the 2018 bonds to the 2023 bonds to just projects that are being done locally. Because in addition to all the bond projects that we're doing, which all of those have really been given out to contractors, independent contractors to work on. The Drainage District has its own projects that it works on internally, and usually those are smaller in nature, anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000, maybe even $1 million that they use out of their general fund to continue to make these smaller projects improve something, improve an outfall, change a gate, do a crossing. So there's all kinds of things that our drainage district does locally. So I encourage anybody that wants a status on any of those types of projects, just go to their website. We have interactive maps, we have status updates, always. As far as we're concerned, one of the major things that we are doing is actually a dual purpose project, which was what we call the Delta Reclamation Project. And that's just north of La Villa. That project started off as a flood mitigation project. It has, along the main drain on the north side of the county, we have, that's primarily how most of the water, flood waters, rain waters, are extracted from our areas and into the drain and outfall into the Laguna Madre. So most of the water that we receive in the valley is going to end up in that main drain. Well, because it has so much water in it on a daily basis, whether we're in a drought situation, whether we're in a rainy situation, there's always water levels in that drain. And we are creating a 225-acre detention facility in La Villa that's going to capture this water. It's going to be attached to the main drain. It'll be diverted from the main drain into the reclamation area. And just like other reclaim projects, we're trying to repurpose that water in use of something. But what we were doing is we're actually putting in a reverse osmosis system to clean this water and use it as potable water. This was something that was started, well before I came into office, but it was a project that it seemed like it just kind of stalled out and really wasn't advancing. TCEQ had awarded the water rights to the county, was a drainage district, had awarded the water rights to the drainage district and saying, what's in this system does belong to you, you can use it. But aside from that, there really hadn't, the project had not advanced maybe the way it should have. What we started doing is trying to figure out, part of the 2018 bond that was issued had money assigned to the flood, to that reclamation project, but as the flood mitigation component. Again, it's flood mitigation and it's water as a resource. So the bond money was used to create the mitigation, which is the detention facility, the diversion of that water from the main system into the reclamation area, and then pushing water back into the main drain and letting it continue on to the outfall, whatever's not used, in that reclamation project. So through our filtration systems and testing that we did, we finally got TCEQ to approve the testing protocol. We went through the testing period. They're in the process of finalizing that report. We anticipate that when that report is finalized in May, that it'll be submitted to TCEQ, and I'm sure that there'll be some back and forth and dialogue between how to finalize that report. Once that's done, we really are pretty close to having the green light to the state saying, just you can go build a water plant now. The challenge in that is, one, we're not a water supply company, so our bonds have to be aligned with the mission and the purpose of the entity. So the drainage district is not a water supply entity. So we've been working on trying to get the state to recognize us as a reclamation district, as a water district, and checking to see if we can kind of find our way into tapping into some of the water development resources from the state level. But this project does not fit, a normal brackish water desalinization type project. So we don't fit into the general mold of what a project that they usually approve and consider for an award. So for us, we didn't rank very well, even though we're repurposing. It's a very green project. That is the benefit. It's the first of its kind ever in the state of Texas. So we're having to create the rules as we go. And it seems like every time we cross one thing off our list, 2 or 3 more pop up. Another obstacle gets put in front of us. But we continue to educate the state legislature, the state reps, our Congress, and our senators, and asking them to keep pushing for this. And with the drought highlighting that we're going through right now, the drought that we're going through right now is really highlighting the need for more water projects. As it was during our study, it was projected that within the next 50 years, the valley was going to be short on water, not going to have sufficient water to provide to all the residents. So we're trying to meet that need by creating this water, potable water. Even then, we're only part of the solution. We're not the entire solution. But here we are, 1 year after, seeing that type of report, and we're already at some of our lowest levels in the reservoirs. And water has now become a very important talking point walking into this legislative session. So we are already educating our representatives, our senators, on what this project is, what it would mean to the valley, how it would provide additional water resources to an area that's already in desperate need. Now, we'll probably cycle back into a very rainy season where we have too much water and all of those things, but the water component will still be there, and it will always be there. So it'll be a perpetual way of us creating that water as a resource for our area.
You said you didn't qualify. Could you have not brought in a local water supply corporation that did fit the criteria and say partner with us, and then you would have been able to access those funds?
I don't think that was necessarily the reason why we didn't qualify. It was because some of the components within the metrics didn't consider, or ours did not score well under those typical scoring mechanisms because it doesn't have those components in it. And I can't tell you straight off the top of my head on what that was, but we had to prove that we could provide water in a drought situation. We had to prove that we had buyers for our water. Well, nobody's committing to buy our water because we don't have water yet. And so if we don't have those scoring numbers inside of our metrics, or we don't meet those metrics, then we don't score well. And we were one of the lowest ranked water projects because We're just trying to push this as a new project.
You said a moment ago that water's becoming increasingly a hot topic down here. Quite a few people down here are giving credit to State Representative Terry Canales for highlighting this at an Hispanic Chamber event. And ever since he said this has got to be a number one issue, lots of people have started mentioning it. And now we even get economic development corporations that hitherto wouldn't have mentioned water, but they know if they want to land these very big manufacturing projects, you've got to have a lot of water. So it is becoming the top issue down here, and that must please you.
Well, it's not pleasing from the sense that we're in a situation like we are. I mean, that's obviously a very stressful situation. Yeah. But, I mean, you look at what happened with the sugar mill here in La Villa, and that plant shutting down, and you're displacing 500 people from a job, 160 which are Hidalgo County residents, and the remaining in Cameron County, more or less. You start thinking about the economic impact of not having water. And the primary reason they're shutting down is because they don't have sufficient water. We've been hearing from the west side of the county that they're considering not issuing meters and stopping development because they don't have sufficient water. When you have farmers saying that they're not going to grow a crop because there's not sufficient irrigation water, that's going to affect all of us. I mean, from just having water to drink and do our normal day-to-day things with sanitation things and cooking and everything else, now you're starting to really impact the economic drivers in our area. And how are you going to attract more business? How are you going to keep these businesses open without, water? So, I'm glad that Terry made it a point to recognize it as a major issue. But I will say that the Region M representatives, which is the local water development board, has been highlighting this as very important. The farmers of our area have been talking to our irrigation districts. You talk to any of them, they've been talking about how this not getting our allocation from Mexico really has put a strain on the farming community, and that eventually it was going to make an impact like this. So it's unfortunate that it got to this point. It's unfortunate that now we're starting to finally get attention from the federal level, because this has a lot to do with that treaty with Mexico and the United States, and them having that allocation of water to give us. I mean, we shouldn't be in this situation. So for Terry to say that this is going to be a top priority is great. But we might be one legislative session too late because of the damage it's already done, with examples like the sugar mill and our partners in the West not being able to develop.
A lot of people don't realize that when Mexico doesn't release the water from Chihuahua, it affects Tamaulipas farmers just as much as the valley farmers. Both sides of the river, we rely on that flow of water coming through. So when they don't meet the treaty obligations, it's both sides of this river in the south that suffers.
And remember that a lot of that produce comes through our international ports. You look at FAR, it's one of the largest, or it's actually the largest agricultural port in the United States. So you start affecting our partners in the south, and how are we going to start getting those vegetables and other produce that comes into the United States? It's going to be far-reaching, more than just the valley.
And as you mentioned, the sugar growers, because like you say, so many of those displaced workers live in Hidalgo County, quite possibly Precinct 1. Is your office involved in helping them get new skills and finding new jobs?
So just yesterday, our community service agency, which we refer to as a CSA, had what they called a soft landing out at the La Villa City Hall, where there's basically like a job fair. It was to give them an opportunity to meet with different companies and entities that have hiring needs for the skill type that they have, whether they're equipment operators or they're line workers. There was definitely a pool of potential employers that were there to assist. A lot of us have been, we have a lot of vacancies in our positions because there haven't been enough workers to fill these spots. So for some of them, they were like really excited. They had 8 positions to fill, and in half a day they had more applicants than positions they had open. So they finally had a pool of people to choose from. So yes, you could say that it's unfortunate that something like that happened. The good news is that the county was there to provide resources to try to assist them in getting back to work. The other thing is that our community service agency was offering assistance with bills and different cash cards to try to assist them during that transition of potentially being unemployed before they had their next job.
Do you want to give a shout out to Director Longoria?
Yeah,
and his
Jaime
team?
Longoria and his team are always there whenever tragedy strikes, and really they're a lot like our Red Cross. They show up when it's the worst circumstances, when people are down on their luck, getting evicted, leaking roofs, sanitation being backed up, losing their jobs, COVID hitting, the extreme heat, the extreme cold. They always find resources to try to help out. I know that he extended courtesies to some of our neighboring partners, and they said we don't have the resources to do that. So for Jaime to continue to find those resources and make them available and be there for people in their most extreme time of need is really an important part for us, because that's when they need help the most, and we want to be that part of the answer for them.
Mm. Well, Commissioner, those are all the questions I had. Do you think we've missed anything else you want to get across?
I think for now, we continue to work on transportation. We continue to look for, one of the important things for me is to try to create an east-west corridor. Aside from the expressway and 107, there's a really big gap in there. And I'm trying to work with Precinct 2 to try to get funding to create that Nolana extension from McAllen all the way to FM 88 in Weslaco. That will provide another 5-lane east-west corridor for us to be able to have alternative routes.
And where would that be?
So Nolana and McAllen.
Oh, yeah.
Extending almost directly straight eastward all the way to FM 88, which is Texas Boulevard here in Weslaco.
But are they just TxDOT? They also want to do a I-69 corridor further north, like say from roughly either maybe Monte Cristo or the airport going.
Yeah, it's a little bit further north, and it eventually would probably hit where the second causeway is being proposed.
But even while they're doing that, you're making the case that the Nolana extension should be there as well.
Absolutely, because that's where the density of our population is. I mean, everything from north of the expressway is where the majority of the growth is going to happen. And in between, Weslaco and Elsa, there really isn't any way to get to our neighbors over there on the west. So for us, and it really Precinct 2 created this project, but we're trying to help find the resources and the money to be able to extend it all the way into Precinct 1. That just gives us another alternative route. I mean, I think all of us would try to stay away from the expressway during this construction over the last 3 years because it gets so congested, and there's nowhere else to go. Unless you go south to 281 or you go north to 107, you're kind of stuck. And 107 is being worked on right now too, so they have a lot of traffic backup as well. So we're trying to work on that.
Yeah, you're talking about it from the point of view of transportation and getting people and commerce moving, but potentially an economic development component to that as well. If you get the funding and you get the extensions built, that's going to be another corridor.
Right. So even aside from that, with the state, with TxDOT, the way they're participating, the Hidalgo County RMA, the Rio Grande Valley MPO, we continue to work together to create all kinds of corridors. Part of our conversation this morning with TxDOT was about commuter safety inside of city streets and trying to get commercial traffic off of our city streets and putting them into like a bypass, putting them into a loop so that you keep them off of city roads and you don't potentially mix, regular commuter traffic with commercial traffic and those 18-wheelers making wide turns and things like that, damaging roads inside of cities. So we're trying to create connectors between the bridges, between the FAR Bridge, the Ansalduas Bridge, the Donna Bridge, and then once traffic comes across that bridge, how do they get to the interstate without having to go through city streets? So we're building this IBTC corridor and then the I-69, the connector with 68. So there's all kinds of things that the MPO and the RMA and TxDOT are all working together on to try to create more safety for people traveling.
So TxDOT very receptive to that?
Oh yeah, they have to use a lot of the state money. Category 2 money is strictly state money. Category 12, we have Alex Mead, that's now a commissioner for TxDOT that has some discretionary decisions on how much he wants to put towards projects himself. So I think all of us are making the pitch on like the most critical projects that would help with that kind of safety and upward mobility per se. So we're looking at what the future looks like with him on that board. It's going to be around that. It's going to be really great for South Texas.
Well, as I say, those were all the questions I had. This has been so informative and educational. I appreciate all the time you've given us today.
Sure. No
We've
problem.
learned a lot. So thanks very much, and we'd like to do this again.
Sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.